but let alone my religious side. With the Mormon faith, I actually went back there and tried to find out why I wasn't part of that because of my homosexuality, and of course being ordained as under the priesthood, I was told that I was not welcome there because of that. So I left the church, and before I could be excommunicated, as they do. However, I've been in a lifelong journey within my own Māori religion and Māori beliefs that incorporates both the spirituality enhances all aspects of we are and who we are, which we call Māori, which is the essence that everything has, like a glass or this microphone or anything around you has an essence. I just need to add in a few bits here sorry, I don't have to close up, do I? Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Sorry.
That's all right.
There's so much there. Is there time for one question? Yep.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. That was a really amazing story. You said you were Seventh-day Adventist, is that correct?
Oh,
Did I hear correctly?
Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ.
Sorry?
Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ.
Right.
Use the microphone.
How do you actually work on an everyday level with your faith? Are you hearing me all right?
Yep. We're just going to repeat your question.
Yeah.
So you just say your question, we'll repeat it into the mic to be recorded.
Do you want me to go down?
No. She just says, how do you reconcile your faith with life?
Is that your question? Did you want
How
to
do you
finish?
reconcile your faith with you being a homosexual? And how does that route work in New Zealand? Like, do they accept you? Obviously they do, but how do you work your faith and your partnership, your life basically, because obviously your faith means a lot to you too?
Did everyone hear that question? It was okay. And I'm going to ask, which is really rude, but I'm going to ask for a short version now, but certainly after the break. They're the kinds of questions we should all talk about a bit more. A short version, sorry. How do you reconcile your faith, the Church of Latter-day Saints, in the living of the everyday with your relationships and partnerships?
With your partner and
With your partner.
life.
Yes, a Muslim partner and my Christian belief and my everyday living as a Māori, somehow it just fits. And we're still together. And I'm still active in the community.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we'll move to the next speaker, which is Joseph, who is Joseph Chikuti. Joseph has been involved with the gay movement since 1973. He was a member of Camp New South Wales and its subgroups Cross Section and Acceptance. He was also a member of Sydney's Metropolitan Community Church in its formative stages, although he never officially became a member of that church. A 78er, yay, he is currently writing a book on the first Sydney gay and lesbian Mardi Gras. Through his appearance on Maltese television in 1994 and the 1997 publication of The Pink Book, the first publication in Maltese on homosexuality, Joseph helped bring homosexuality onto Malta's national agenda. His book, Queer Mediterranean Memories, was published this year, which is this one here. And I love the subtitle, Penetrating the Secret History and Silence of Gay and Lesbian Disguise in the Maltese Archipelago. Whoa! And he said to me he's getting some controversy. I wonder why. It's brilliant. In his early life, Chikuti was a member of the Society of Christian Doctrine, an organisation not that dissimilar to Opus Dei, a professed member of the Franciscan Minor Conventuals, and briefly a member of the Society of St. Gerard, within which the Catholic Church later disbanded. He has a Master of Arts in Political Science and a licentiate in Theology. He's a barrister and solicitor, working mainly with gay men and lesbians. Joseph.
I imagine I should start with the question, who am I? In answering this most basic question, I have to look at, amongst other things, my ethnicity, my gender, my sexuality, my family, my education, economic status, and the rest of it. The list is endless. So to answer briefly, let me say, I am a man, I am Maltese, I am a Catholic agnostic. To some, I am irredeemably anti-clerical. I am a 78er, an activist, an out and proud homosexual, a starer, a lawyer, and a writer. The list is endless with me, as it is with every one of you. Invariably, tensions and contradictions arise. That is part of the human condition. As members of the queer rainbow, we face particular demands, including the demand to conceal our sexuality. That demand denies us the chance of a rounded identity. We carry this demand with us for years, and we come to know ourselves only grudgingly. Some of us accept what others say about us. We have all gone through a sense of shame, and for this reason, many of us have been a people without a history, without our heroes, without our symbols, and without our saints. Worse still, we have come to accept what others have said about the value and significance of our sexuality. And therefore, I do not set out to try and reconcile my sexuality with my previous religion and my ethnicity. On the contrary, I try to reconcile my ethnicity and whatever beliefs I have with my sexuality. My sexuality is the most important aspect of my life. We often say that homosexuality has changed over the years. I have some reservations about that because same-sex love really is not much different now than it used to be. But our ethnicity and our religion have been in a constant state of flux. And I would say that it is these components of our life that in fact have been subject to the greatest change. I'd like to now just focus on the idea of race. The word race is derived from the Arabic word ras. The Maltese word is also ras, which means head. Basically what we're talking about is we're talking about a group of people who are derived from a single person or a couple. Now, strictly speaking, there's only one race, because according to the Old Testament, there was only one Adam and Eve. So, race, in its technical term, cannot describe the German people, the Maltese people, the Australian people, the English people. What we're dealing with here are ethnic groups. Even if we were to focus on, say, Maltese identity, what Maltese identity are we talking about? Are we talking that of the liberal mainland, or of its more conservative sister island of Gozo? Are we talking of identities in the villages, or are we talking of identities in towns? Are we talking about Maltese identity in Australia, and if so, are we talking about the first generation migrants or their descendants? Should we assume any of these identities are or have been homogeneous? Now, quite often you hear people saying, and this has happened really with every ethnic group, that homosexuality is not part of this or that culture. I strongly resent that, and I disagree with that. What we're dealing with are taboos that we should confront. When I started to write the book about homosexuality in Malta, I thought I would finish it in a year, and I thought it would be about 30 or 40 pages. I realized that in fact there was a lot of history about homosexuals that was hidden. what we've got to do is to make the invisible visible. That has been my challenge, and that is probably who I am now. I often describe myself as one of the revolting puffs of the 1970s, because I wasn't that much of an activist, but I certainly went around as many demonstrations as I had the guts to attend. Let's look at the idea of religious identity based on religion. Christians say that human beings are uniquely created in the image of God. Now, when you create it in the image of God, that is in fact quite a responsibility. And especially if your life in eternity depends on how good an image of God you become, the business of heaven and hell becomes a very serious business. And ethnicity and sexuality become quite irrelevant. At least I am not familiar with any tradition in the Christian faith that says that when I die, I'm going to heaven and be welcomed by a group of rather handsome men. Perhaps Roman Catholicism would have far more converts. As a young boy, most major events that surrounded me had something to do with religion. I remember, for example, praying when I was about 15, 16, that the Labour Party would not be elected in the government. It was led by a rather charismatic man, Dom Mintoff, and many feared that he would turn Malta into a communist country, a sort of a Cuba. And I spent many hours on my knees praying in many churches, hoping that Mintoff would not be elected. On that occasion, God had heard my prayer. However, I have to say that the photograph that I value the most is probably the one I have taken with Mintoff, because Mintoff was the one, in fact, who decriminalized homosexuality and who set about secularizing Malta. I have said that as a young boy I experienced very little tension between my sexuality and my religion. And that was reasonably obvious, because at that time homosexuality was simply deemed a temptation by the devil. There was no talk of sexual orientation. I often confessed my sins to priests, and the priest assured me that that was a sign from God, that I had been chosen for the priesthood. I quickly learned that God works in more mysterious ways than I thought. But conflict between my religion and my sexuality did emerge when I joined the ranks of the religious order, and I found myself falling in love with a friar, being lectured along with many others on the dangers of particular friendship, which in fact told me that many of them were gay. And I later learned, of course, that scripture could be interpreted differently, that the tradition in the Christian and the Catholic faith was really a tradition of dissidence. I also picked up a number of subliminal messages that are there to attract gay men. Put simply, what I really say here is this: we should stop thinking that the conflict that exists between our faith, our ethnicity, and our sexuality is so different from the normal conflict that is part of the human condition. And I think as gay men and lesbians, we should make it our mission to ensure that ethnic identities and religious identities are changed to accommodate us. Thank you.
Any one question? It's a very strong challenge and a very important one to put out there. Okay, we'll move on and we'll take up this discussion later. Shanton Shang is more Australian and Singaporean than Malaysian, but will always be labelled Malaysian because that's where he was born. More to the fact, he's not been back to his hometown, Kuching, is that right? Kuching? Sarawak, which is a very different Malaysia in more than 9 years. He's excited about visiting Kuching again in January next year for a few days. Shanton also considers himself spiritual and likes to think of himself as Christian because he loves God, and he's Catholic because he fears God. Shanton works in the higher education sector and travels rather extensively in Asia and Australia and New Zealand. He was a founder of the Orange Ribbon program on Joy 94.9, an original co-convener of the AGMC, yes, and though not a political commentator, he finds backboneless leadership most annoying.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this. And I guess when I was asked to do this, I thought, would it be a question of me answering questions, or would it be me telling my life story? And learning from my fellow members, I've decided to tell my life story. I think it's very important that you all know a bit more about me. I was born in Kuching, Sarawak, which is a very different part of Malaysia to the Malaysia that is viewed by most of the rest of the world, because Sarawak is always seen as a backward state. In fact, we're very colonial as well. It's the land of the headhunters, so don't mess with me, don't ask difficult questions. The headhunters do not necessarily hunt heads because we were cannibals. We hunt heads because that would reduce the size of the spirit and the ideals of the rival tribe. And it was obviously criminalized, and with the advent of colonialism, which was a good thing, and they got rid of piracy as well. Could have been interesting, but and I'm Chinese as well, but it was only about 3 years ago that I found out that I had indigenous blood in me. Not Australian indigenous, obviously I was from Sarawak, so Sarawak indigenous. And my first brush with the Catholic faith was when they refused to baptize me. They knew something was up. And this was, when I was about 2 months old. I think my parents tried to have me baptized. And the priest said, Shanton is not the name of a Catholic saint, so you need to find him another name before he can be baptized. So I got a very lovely second middle name, which I will have to kill you if I tell you. So I'm not going there. So that was my first brush with the Catholic faith. And being the first son of the first son of the first son of a Chinese family meant that I had all the attention of the world on me, which was very important for me, obviously. And when, so all my birthdays were basically this little baby surrounded by toys, lots of toys. And my mom, being the good woman that she is, would be very careful about not spoiling me. So she would ask me to pick 1 or 2 and then keep the rest in the closet that I can have a look at but can't touch. So that was her way of disciplining me. Fantastic. Anyway, I remember that when I was 3 years old, I had all these toys, everything from, those Tommy guns that they used to give kids in the 70s, to this blow-up doll. Who would give a 3-year-old a blow-up doll? A blow-up doll of a girl, and a blow-up reindeer, and a flute. And guess which ones I picked? I picked the reindeer and the flute and the blow-up doll, because I could pick 3, and I left all the guns to the side. Okay, that should have been an indication to my parents, but no. Anyway, so life went on, and when I was about 11 years old, I went to Singapore ostensibly to further my education, but mostly it was because they had better TV programs in Singapore than Malaysia. And so I went to Singapore to further my education. Fantastic. And that was when I discovered I was Malaysian. Never knew I was Malaysian until I went to Singapore. And in Singapore, kids used to make fun of me because I spoke English in a very different manner, with a very different accent. So they thought I was stupid, you see, because I spoke with an accent, until I started beating them at Scrabble. And they thought, gosh, this kid actually knows words like pig, P-I-Q-U-E. We didn't even know what does that word mean, even, And so people start to think, people put all sorts of labels on you just because of who you look like, what you say, and what you do. When I was 21 years old, I went to Perth. Perth is part of Australia, for those of you the other side. But it's a very different part of Australia to Melbourne, I have to say. I love Perth, but I won't live there. But when I went to Perth, that was when I first discovered I was Asian. I never knew I was Asian until I came to Australia, to be very honest. When people talk about that Asian boy, it's like, oh, me? You mean me? I didn't even know what was Asian. What's this term Asian and what it meant? apparently I'm, similar to all the Japanese, Koreans, Indians, Thais, Vietnamese, Filipino, Hong Kong. You name it, we're Asian. So I became Asian all of a sudden. So this new identity, which is a struggle, which is a real struggle. Up to today, when people say, those two men suspects of Asian descent. It could be any one of us, as a very important person in the world used to say, Margaret Cho, for this, I want to quote her. She used to say, when people say to her, "We can't tell you apart. You all look the same," and her response would be, "Why do you want to tell us apart?" and it's that whole concept that being Asian in Australia, you are lumped with anything and everything that looks mildly yellow and slanted-eyed. And I find that really challenging, to be honest. And the gay community is not helpful at all, particularly when they say gay Asian men, GAMS. Right? If not for the fact that my love of food is greater than my need for sex, I would probably be bulimic, because the reality is, as a gay Asian man, you're supposed to be about 20 kilos and hairless and effeminate, which I obviously am doing very well. And in Australia, that's one of the biggest struggles. It's not so much with my sexuality. My sexuality is fine. It's when I try to express my sexuality when I first was coming out, going to the clubs and being told, "You're gay Asian male. What are you doing?" You're supposed to be giggly and skinny and smooth and subservient.
Bottom.
Yeah. Yes. So it's all these. Thanks, Ali. So it's a real struggle when we talk about that whole concept of being gay, Asian, and male here in Australia, because I constantly challenge the idea of gay, Asian, male just by being me, and it's a struggle because it is not very well accepted. People don't understand the concept, and people like to put labels. I could never win Miss Lotus, and I would never want to win Miss Lotus. And that's fine for people, but not for me. When my mom first met my then boyfriend, because I didn't tell her it was a boyfriend, she said, "Is he gay?" I said, "Well, what do you think? Why don't you ask him the next time you see him?" Because she didn't know that we were going out. And my mom is Catholic and I'm Catholic, and I jokingly always say that my love of God keeps me Christian and my fear of God keeps me Catholic. It's the insurance policy. But the reality is, the human mind, I believe, is an amazing thing, and it's only limited by us putting labels on ourselves. And this whole idea of reconciling my spirituality, my love of God, my love of sex with men, and my ethnicity, and the whole idea of me just being me, I go by the very, very basic tenet of the Christian faith, and that is, love one another as I have loved you. But in the first place, you need to learn to love yourself before you can love others. And what I love about the human race, so to speak, is the diversity of our human race, with the exception possibly of annoying people and dangerous drivers. Other than that, I love most people. Fundamentally, they're not even part of the human race to me, because I find that they're so full of hatred that when you use scripture to justify hatred, that sets you apart as not being part of the community, not part of my tribe, not part of my people. So that's how I reconcile my race, my ethnicity, my sexuality, my spirituality. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone with a burning question at this point? Comment? Can we just first of all then thank our fantastic and as that song used to say, in the 1990s, please don't go. There's lots of food, and we really want to open this up to a fantastic discussion today, because you've raised lots of issues, and there have been some great questions as well. And we really need to have a discussion and hear from you, and get some critiques, some comments. So hang around for about 20 minutes for something to eat, some coffee and tea. Palmina and Dimitri, I've just named people who will help you around, and then we'll come back and hopefully we'll have a really important discussion and answer some of those questions you've raised. Thank you. And come say hello to the speakers.
Oh my God, that was so
I'll just everyone getting food and having a